What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one I wanted to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers, and break down what's happening to the overall market as far as the important data that just came out, not to mention new developments for Tesla, which are very important. But before I break into detail all this information, before I talk about Tesla, SPY, and all these different tickers, let me just mention a couple of things. I am personally not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, deposit $100, you're guaranteed 7 free stocks. They're going to be fractional shares from the Magnificent Seven, and this offer ends very soon in just a couple of weeks. Anyways, for Tesla, I want to call out something very important. As you guys know, Tesla has this gap down here all the way down in the 170s, and we also have some gaps on SPY that are down below, but the market is trying to rebound at least temporarily, and I do think it's possible for us to try to attempt to push higher. Yes, we could try to push a little bit higher before we see a move to the downside, so I wanted to give you guys a very important warning about how this could play out. Just remember, we have some data coming out for today. Today's Thursday. We just had initial jobless claims come in a little bit below some of the expectations at 208,000, with continuing jobless claims being very close to estimations. So that's what's coming out so far. The labor market is showing a little bit of contraction, but it's not that far from expectations. And we also have the New York Fed Treasury purchases coming out. Might not cause anything too crazy at 10:30 a.m., but that's something worth noting. And then finally at 11:30 a.m., we have the 4-week and 8-week bill auctions coming out. So we'll have to see how this ends up affecting the market. So that is it for data. Most of the data that remains is not that crazy. It's all kind of minor. We'll see what happens with these bill auctions at 11:30 a.m. Now, when it comes to news about the markets, we saw this big surge followed by a drop in the market, but we'll have to see what we end up getting as times go on. Looking at the rate hike being unlikely by Jerome Powell, he did say some very important things about how stagflation is not on the table in his opinion, but there are some changes that are happening into the economy as they're maintaining strength. But he's a little bit uncertain about inflation. He did say for the short term he's uncertain. We have to be very careful, and he still said that inflation is hotter than expected. Prices are very, very sticky. Inflation is still too high, and further progress in bringing it down is not assured, and the path forward is uncertain. That's what he said. So, like I said, his words were very, very mixed. I know some people think that he was all dovish, this and that, but you have to kind of remember the other things that he said about inflation and how the Fed still has lots of work to be done. So you want to be very, very mindful of that. I wouldn't necessarily say he was straight up dovish. There were some very concerning things he said about how inflation is still too hot and the Fed has work to do. But with that being said, the market had a very, very interesting response. Google had to lay off at least 200 employees from its core team just before it announced the insane earnings. So that news has come out, and they are talking about more potential layoffs. There's also more news coming out right over here that more and more Americans may start cutting their spending, looking at the way things are falling right now, looking at the effect of these higher interest rates. So it's just taking some time. And then there's also news about Peloton, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But that's it for some news right now. For earnings, this morning we just had Peloton and Moderna, and then after the market closes, we have Aapl and Coinbase. So get ready for some high volatility from these stocks after market close. For Peloton, they're going to be laying off about 15% of their staff, and then they're also going to refinance their debt, which is decent news for them. When it comes to earnings alone, we actually saw some decent earnings. Their net loss was about 45 cents versus a loss of 37 cents expected. So that was not that great. Revenue is at 718 million, which is once again a little bit below expectations. And what still is dropping a little bit, they have actually announced that they're going to be looking at their outlook. They reduced its connecting fitness subscription outlook by about 30,000 members. And we're going to be watching to see what changes from there. But despite that, we did see their full year outlook looking pretty decent. I would say it wasn't too bad. With that changing right over here, there's actually changes in their gross margins and some more improvements. But the fact that they're refinancing their debt has been very good for them, considering the fact that earnings were not the greatest. And we're still seeing the share price reacting positively. For Moderna, it is once again kind of flat right here. We're not seeing the most insane move, but it's a little green. Their loss per share is $3.07, which is above expectations. And their revenue was 167 million, above expectations, so not bad for them. And we had decent outlooks as well. So as far as Tesla goes, Tesla announced a lot of these potential job cuts, and on top of this, their interns are in a very, very similar place. They're basically in a position where they have to rescind offers just weeks before internships are about to start. So it's very sad to hear about that. This is a big change that they're making, but Tesla has to do what's necessary for their own company. And there is going to be likely more layoffs for Tesla. So that's very sad to hear, but it is what it is, guys. The company's in a position where they have to do this. Now, we did have a good piece of news that's helping Tesla rebound. That's their Chinese sales that came out. We saw an increase in their insurance registrations for the very, very end of April. And we got some nice sales as we're seeing very, very nice growth. Once again, guys, with this growth that's coming out, a nice increase by about 12,600 registrations in China, at least for the final week. And we had a very, very nice looking April overall. With that happening and with insurance registrations increasing, I think that April is a nice month for Tesla sales, but I wouldn't necessarily rule out the possibility that the share price will not have these nuances. So, what do I see for the markets? In my personal opinion, in my video yesterday, I said the market's going to likely rebound a bit, but there is still that risk of downside. I want to give you guys a warning about that. And the reason that's going to likely happen is because of cyclicals. Also, based off the way we're starting to see yields shifting, we're still seeing yields increase after Jerome Powell's speech because he mentioned that rates have to be up for higher for longer. The dollar is up a little bit, but the yields are starting to increase, and we're seeing a shift in the bonds market. So that's really affecting our stock market right now. So I'm going to start off with SPY before I break down Tesla, by the way. There's a possible head and shoulders in the hourly time frame, but if we break past 510, then yes, we could invalidate this and go even higher temporarily before we see another move to the downside. For now, I'm eyeing kind of like a head and shoulders just to see how well SPY does. And we have a resistance that's currently approaching at the 505 area. So we have our 50 EMA at 504. Then we have 505.5 around that area at our 200 EMA. If that breaks, I'll be watching this right shoulder potentially forming at 507. Those are going to be our three resistance levels. For support, you're going to be looking at 502. If we lose that, we're coming down to 500. And eventually 497 and 493. Now, on SPY, it's possible we do push a little bit higher. We could be forming a right shoulder before we continue lower. If we break the high at 510, then we can remain bullish and go a little bit higher before we get a much bigger sell-off, in my personal opinion. But I believe we're going to be coming down to 493 very soon. We'll just have to see how high we go because right now we are pushing a little higher. So watch and see where we end up peaking first before the move to the downside comes. Okay, so we're going to try to push higher. We'll see where we end up rejecting. We have a gap to fill down here. We are going to reject soon. But the question is, where do we reject? Do we reject right here at 504? Do we go up to 505? I'll just be waiting a little bit. I don't see signs that we're rejecting yet. So wait and see. And that's going to determine which way we end up going. As far as Tesla goes, I'm noticing something very similar. So I am seeing a little bit of weakness on the chart. I still think Tesla could push higher. So we have a nice double bottom right here. We could continue to push a little higher. So if we do hold above 182.5, we're looking at 186 as our next target. A little bit under that. Then we have 188 above that, then 190 as resistance. Watch and see if Tesla could kind of pop a little bit before it ends up dropping. But I do believe Tesla will eventually retest 178, and there is a risk of eventually coming down to fill this gap. But look for a little push initially first. We could go all the way up to about 185 or higher in the beginning before we end up turning. So make sure you watch for that. Watch Tesla try to push a little bit higher, and we'll see where it ends up going. Now, if we end up breaking past 190, we could get one more big push before it ends up rejecting, but I don't expect it to push that hard. I do think it's going to push a little higher, though, into the 180s, 185 plus, 188. And watch and see if we get a rejection because of how the market's performing. For the QQQ, this is looking a little bit weak right here as we're struggling at the 50 EMA. We also have a potential head and shoulders like structure, so watch and see, do we get one more push up to 428 and then reject? Do we reject off our 50 EMA at 428.6 and then start coming back down to 422 or lower? Or do we, if we break past 433, we could get one more big push before we turn, but that's looking a little bit less likely. So the QQQ is looking a little bit weaker than SPY, in my personal opinion. Watch and see where we peak, though. That's what I'm going to be waiting for. This could be a signal we're about to reject, but we have to wait for confirmation. If the market does continue to push, look for a potential rejection, and watch and see how we perform. We're at resistance right now on the QQQ. If we lose support right over here at 422.75, we're going to be dipping to 420. So I do think we're going to dip, but look and see if we get a little push up first before we end up getting that dip. Watch for that and watch and see if this head and shoulders develops on the QQQ. All right, so look for a little more upside potentially. We'll see if this could attempt to go higher before this thing starts turning back down and starts sinking. So watch for that move, guys. I do believe we're going to sink, so get ready. With Aapl, we're kind of flat right now. We could even try to push higher towards 172.5. If we break through that, look for 174. If we lose support right here, we're going to be looking at 171 then 170. I wouldn't be surprised if we actually pump a little bit, come back down, kind of trade sideways for a bit before we get a much bigger move. And when the bigger move comes, it's going to be very dependent on earnings for Apple. So will Apple earnings cause Apple to explode into the 180s, or is Apple about to get a big rug pull? That's going to have a big effect on the whole market. Finally, we have Nvidia stock right here. Nvidia has a possible kind of like resistance structure right here at 850. Watch and see, do we break past 850 and go up to 862.5, excuse me, or do we end up rejecting? If this is where, if we fail to break 850, we're going to be dipping all the way back down, in my opinion, towards the 825 area. So that's going to be our key resistance. Can we break past 850? That's, or at least very close to the 850 range, or do we get a rejection? We could attempt to go higher. I could be looking for a retest of 850, maybe even higher levels before it tries to turn. But watch and see, guys. Can we crack 850? That's going to be our key level. All right. So with that being said, that's it for the markets, guys. I'm going to kind of end the video quickly from here. For Tesla, I do believe Tesla has potential to go higher. We could push to 185 or even 187, but just be mindful that there is a risk of the broader markets getting a rejection soon. Okay, the whole market might start sinking soon over the next few weeks, and I think that that's going to drag Tesla down. That's my personal opinion. I think we could come down to fill this gap, but first let's see how high Tesla goes once it tries to get its rebound. All right, so we'll be watching this. Watch and see if Tesla could go all the way up to 186 plus. Look for the little rebounds temporarily, but just be prepared for what's about to come in the future. I want to give you guys a warning about that. All right, so thank you for listening. Have a great day, guys, and I'll see you guys very soon on the next one. Thank you and peace out.